Everyone thinks relationships fail because of cheating, trust issues, communication problems, or emotional immaturity. Everyone thinks love collapses after months or years. But the truth is much darker, much quieter, much more psychologically brutal than anyone admits. Most relationships fail long before they ever begin. They fail in the shadows, in the silence between two people, in the unspoken assumptions, in the emotional wounds that neither person even realizes they're carrying. The end isn't the tragedy. The beginning is. Before we go deeper, hit subscribe and like the video. A relationship doesn't collapse when someone lies. Collapses when someone hides. It doesn't collapse when someone cheats. Collapses when someone disconnects but pretends they haven't. It doesn't collapse when communication fails. Collapses when intention fails. People step into relationships with broken foundations and wonder why the house collapses. But here's the hidden truth. People don't date each other. They date their fears, their wounds, their unmet needs, their childhood conditioning. The relationship is just the stage play where their psychology performs. A man doesn't fall for a woman because she's beautiful. He falls for the version of himself he thinks he will become beside her. A woman doesn't fall for a man because he's strong. She falls for the feeling of safety she imagines he will provide. We don't fall in love with people. We fall in love with relief. And that is the beginning of the end. Because relationships built on emotional relief are not relationships. They're coping mechanisms disguised as romance. Two people enter a connection trying to escape themselves, trying to fill holes in their identity, trying to outrun their insecurities, trying to find someone who will soothe their unhealed wounds instead of someone who will challenge them to heal. This is why so many relationships never stand a chance. They don't fall apart, they were never whole. Modern relationships fail before they begin because people date with self-protection, not self-awareness. They present their curated selves, not their true selves. They hide their shadow, their trauma, their patterns, their expectations, their fears, not because they're manipulative, but because they're terrified. Terrified of being rejected for who they actually are. Terrified of being abandoned for being imperfect. Terrified of being seen too deeply too soon. So they create a version of themselves that is easier to love, even if it's not real. Relationships fail because they begin with illusions. Because both people fall in love with a character, not a person. Because the mask fits perfectly, until it doesn't. But the collapse starts much earlier. It begins with emotional residue, all the unresolved pain people drag from relationship to relationship. Pain they never processed. Pain they never named. Pain they never saw through. Pain that shapes their reactions, their expectations, their fears. A woman abandoned emotionally as a child doubts affection. A man criticized his whole life doubts his worth. A woman betrayed in past relationships expects inconsistency. A man invalidated growing up expects rejection. These wounds don't disappear at the start of something new. They grow louder. They influence everything. They turn innocent moments into threats. They turn curiosity into fear. They turn affection into danger. So relationships fail before they begin because neither person is entering the present. They're dragging their past. But the darkest reason relationships fail early is this. Most people don't want love. They want emotional certainty. They don't want truth. They want reassurance. They don't want intimacy. They want control. They don't want a partner. They want an emotional safety net. And real relationships don't offer emotional guarantees. People crave connection but fear vulnerability. People crave closeness but protect their independence. People crave honesty but weaponize the truth. People crave stability but chase excitement. People crave depth but are terrified of being known. And here is the deepest truth of all. You cannot build a real relationship with someone who fears being seen. Because love is not built on performances. It's built on transparency. But modern dating is a battlefield of masks. Women pretend to be unbothered. Men pretend to be detached. Women pretend to be independent. Men pretend to be emotionless. Everyone pretends not to care first. Everyone waits for the other to try harder. Relationships fail because the game becomes more important than the connection. Because strategy replaces sincerity. Because ego replaces vulnerability. Because fear replaces intimacy. Relationship failure begins in the micro moments no one notices. When a text is replied to out of fear instead of interest, when a question is avoided to avoid conflict, when discomfort is buried instead of expressed, when boundaries are hinted at instead of spoken, when needs are disguised as jokes, when wounds are hidden behind silence. These small fractures accumulate. And by the time the relationship officially fails, it has already been broken for months, long before anyone admits it. But the deeper reason relationships die before they start is because most people aren't choosing partners, they're choosing patterns. A woman who grew up with unpredictability chooses men who trigger chaos. A man who grew up feeling unseen chooses women who ignore him. A woman who fears abandonment chooses emotionally unavailable men. A man who fears rejection chooses women who test him. People choose what feels familiar, not what feels healthy. Because the nervous system is addicted to what it understands. Even pain feels like home if that's the only home you've known. So relationships fail at the beginning because people aren't drawn to compatibility, they're drawn to trauma. But the collapse goes further. Relationships also fail because people look for partners to solve problems only they can fix. They want someone to quiet their anxiety. Someone to erase their loneliness. Someone to fill their emptiness. Someone to give them identity, purpose, grounding, clarity. But love isn't medicine. It's a mirror. It doesn't heal you. It exposes you. It doesn't complete you. It reveals where you're incomplete. It doesn't fix your wounds. It shows you where they are. This is why so many relationships start strong and end suddenly. The moment the fantasy fades, the moment the mirror appears, the moment the relationship becomes real, people run. Because most people don't want relationships. They want emotional anesthesia. They want temporary relief from themselves. But here's the final truth, the one no one wants to hear. Relationships fail before they begin because people don't prepare for love. They prepare for abandonment. They assume the worst. They overthink every message. They create narratives in their heads. They sabotage with insecurity. They test instead of trust. They protect themselves instead of loving. And love cannot grow in a protected heart. Love cannot survive in a mind full of stories. Love cannot thrive in someone who fears loss more than they want connection. The hidden reason relationships fail before they begin is because people enter them guarded, wounded, projected, impatient, anxious, and unavailable. They want someone to choose them before choosing themselves. They want someone to trust them before becoming trustworthy. They want someone to open up before becoming emotionally open. They want someone who is healed while avoiding their own healing. The beginning fails because the foundation is still cracked. So here is the truth, spoken simply. Relationships fail long before they begin because people aren't ready for the love they say they want. They aren't emotionally grounded enough to handle intimacy. They aren't self-aware enough to handle conflict. They aren't secure enough to handle honesty. They aren't healed enough to handle healthy love. People aren't afraid of love. They're afraid of being fully known. Because the moment someone truly sees you, you lose the illusion of control. You lose the mask. You lose the safety of your performance. You become vulnerable. And vulnerability is the doorway to real love, but the barrier most people never walk through. Relationships don't fail because they are weak. They fail because people begin them too wounded, too guarded, too afraid, too disconnected from their own truth to ever build something real. Love doesn't die in the ending. It dies in the beginning. Quietly, slowly, psychologically, And once you see this truth, you can't unsee it. See the pattern. Protect your energy. This is DepthRealm.